Good afternoon and welcome to the 2020 Educators Conference presented by Buckeye Book Fair and Tri-County Educational Service Center. My name is Andrew Johnson and I will be facilitating this session today. I want to make sure that everybody has an understanding of how to ask questions and communicate if they are attending through Zoom. So you do have a Q&A and chat feature available in your toolbar. If you have questions during the presentation, please use those features to ask. We will answer questions as they come in. We want this to be beneficial for you and we want this to be interactive as well. So you have questions, ask away. I also want to say thank you for taking the time. I know it's a Friday, so thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon, and we appreciate it. And on that note, our session today is only going to last about an hour, so we should be out around 5 o'clock. At the end of the session, I will share with you a link as well as a QR code where you can fill out a very short survey and you will have a certificate for contact hours emailed directly to you. You can use that to for hours towards recertification if you are a teacher. And with that being said, I am going to move forward and introduce our featured keynote presenter today, who is a former teacher herself. So I'm excited to introduce Sharon M. Draper, who is a two-time Coretta Scott King award-winning author, most recently for Copper Sun and previously for Forged by Fire. She's also the recipient of the Coretta Scott King John Steptoe Author Award for New Talent for Tears of a Tiger, and the Coretta Scott King Author Honor for the Battle of Jericho and November Blues. Her other books include Romiette and Julio, Darkness Before Dawn, and Double Dutch. She just made a move to Florida, but she used to teach high school English for about 25 years in Cincinnati. She's a popular conference speaker addressing educational and literary groups both nationally and internationally. And today, she's going to provide insights and advice backed by her years of experience as a master teacher to foster engagement in reading and learning. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon.
Well, hi, Sharon. Hello. Hello, am I on? Are we good?
Yes, you are, yeah. Absolutely.
I'm delighted to be here. Actually, I'm not, because I want us to be there in person. I miss the interactions. You know, I've gone to the Buckeye Book Fair for 100 years. And, you know, the best part about it is seeing old friends and running into teachers and librarians and parents and students and people who are coming in and everybody's excited about books. And here's a new author and here's an author over here and here's a book and I've never seen this one. And I miss that so much. I miss the personal interactions that this conference offers and other conferences and other venues. So I just want to acknowledge what we're missing, and then give thanks for what we have, because we are able to do it this way. I imagine 6 months ago, none of us knew how to do a Zoom conference. I knew there was such a thing as Zoom, but I had never Zoomed before. So all of us are in a different situation than we were back in February. We have much to be thankful for and much to look forward to, and lots of things to learn. I want to give special thanks to all the teachers who are doing it from home, doing it from remote locations, who are working with their students, who are trying to figure out how to do that, to the students who are figuring out how to do online learning. This is not something that we had time to practice for. We had to figure it out as we were going. And I really, really admire the teachers that figured it out and put it together and made it a meaningful thing, especially back in March and April when nobody really knew what they were doing at all. But we took them there, we got the kids out, we had I watched my first online high school graduation. It was beautiful and it was sad at the same time, where the kids drove around in their cars and got their diplomas through the car window. But it was powerful because traditions continued. So I want to give notice and thanks to the resilience of all the teachers that made this happen, all the students that made this happen, all the parents that came together, all the library specialists who made access to books available. We've been through some stuff, so I'm looking forward to the future. I'm looking forward to us coming together perhaps next year, where we can all be together in the same room and we can give each other hugs and support and sit in large rooms where we're all breathing each other's air and we're listening to a wonderful speaker up at the front. I'm looking forward to that. So I hope we're able to do that. I want to talk a little bit about reading and the importance of reading, especially as we think about our lives in a pandemic. If you are a student, if once you've watched everything on Netflix, and I think many of us have, we've just cleared the board. We remember that there are those things called books, and books are there for us all the time. Books are there early in the morning, late at night. I was one of those kids that read books up under the covers, and I lived about 10 minutes from my local library. So I went every single week to my local library and I checked out 10 books because that was the max that you could check out. And I would read and read and read. That was my childhood, was reading. When I was a kid, we didn't have 97 channels. There were three. Channel 3, Channel 5, and Channel 9, and that was all your choices. And sometimes the TV went off at midnight. So, not that my mother turned it off, that was all the TV. You would reach the end of television for the day. I'm old. But books were my mainstay, they were my life. And so I did lots and lots of reading. Sometimes students will ask me, how do I become a writer? I said, first, you have to be a reader. First, you have to love books, love words, love language, and be able to just relish in that. And then you have to be able to put it down and let somebody else see the wonderful images that you have in your mind, the characters, the places, the people. And I read so much. I learned about the world through books. We did not have the internet then. So I learned about the world of I remember a book I read about a girl in ancient China, and I learned about that culture. I read a book about a girl who lived in India. I would not have known that. There was no internet to go find that out. I learned it through reading a book. But those books are still there, and that knowledge is still there. And finding stories through fiction is what gave me the power to be able to write. I grew up to be a teacher, taught English and reading, loved it. And I worked with young people as a teacher to work with them with reading and writing. I did not plan to be a writer. I wish that had been my long-term goal. You will write books, but it didn't occur to me until much later. And my very first book, called Tears of a Tiger, ended up being really, really successful. And I said, wow, I can write. I like this writing thing. This is fun and it's easy and it's enjoyable. So I wrote Tears of a Tiger, and then I wrote the sequel, which is called Forged by Fire. And I think I've just finished book number, 32, 33, something like that. But I've been very blessed to be able to write. And especially now that we have this pandemic time, all of us who are writers should have like 72 books ready in the next couple of weeks, because we certainly have had the time to do so. So yeah, I'm working on a couple of things. We'll see what happens with that. I want to talk about the importance of reading in the lives of everyone during a pandemic. And I'm going to give you just a couple of suggestions through things that I have written. And I want to hear from you. And there is a chat and a place where you can ask questions. So I want to hear, when you get that opportunity, questions that you might have about story and creation of story. And the other authors can answer those questions as well. And you know what's interesting? My answer on the creation of story and say David's answer about the creation of story will be two different answers, because all creators have different sources for their creativity and for their production of words. So if you want to be a writer, you don't have to be a writer like me. You just have to you just need to have the idea in your head and the words on the paper in front of you. So I want to start just a little bit talking about this book called Out of My Mind. Out of My Mind is like my favorite child. And I won't tell you which one of my 4 children is my favorite, but this is like my favorite baby. And because she's been all over the world. Out of My Mind's been translated into 22 different languages. And I've received letters from young people in Japan and China and India and France, because they read the book in Chinese or Japanese or French or whatever. And so the book has been a blessing, and it's been able to touch a lot of lives. It's a very simple book. It's about a girl who is maybe 5th grade, who is brilliant. Oh my goodness, she's so smart. The smartest young person in her classroom. The young lady who knows all the answers to everything. Brilliant, but nobody really knows it because she cannot walk and she cannot talk and she cannot communicate. So nobody knows her brilliance. It's all stuck in her mind. And so that's very, very frustrating. The title Out of My Mind has a little bit to do with her basic frustration. So how Melody finds a way to communicate and to let the world know that, oh yes, she has a lot to say is part of the plot. I'm going to read just a really, really, really short segment about dreaming, because all of us have dreams. All of us have things that we wish we could do or secretly desire to do. If you're young, things that you want to be when you grow up. And it's a good thing to have dreams and to have possibilities. Melody in the story has dreams also. She can't walk, she can't talk, but she does have dreams. When I sleep, she says, I dream. And in my dreams, I can do anything. I get picked first on the playground for games. I can run so fast. I take gymnastics and I never fall off the balance beam. I know how to square dance and I'm good at it. I call my friends on the phone and we talk for hours. I whisper secrets. I sing. When I wake up in the morning, it's always sort of a letdown as reality hits me. I have to be fed and dressed so I can spend another long day in the happy face room at Spalding Street School. But when I dream in color. So Melody's story is not a sad story. It's a story of power. It's a story of survival. It's a story of making the best of your world. Melody does not get magically cured because we don't get magically cured from things like that. But we do have the power to face the problems that we are given through our inner strength. And that's what Melody finds. The other book I want to talk about real quick is called Blended. And Blended is the newest one. And I'm sorry, gentlemen, that it's pink and white. I promise the next book's going to be about a boy, and we're going to make it a different color. But anyway, it's got the pink and white stripes, and I kind of like it. Blended is about a young lady whose name is Isabella. Well, her father calls her Isabella. I mean, her father calls her Isabella. Her mother calls her Izzy. Her father is wealthy and lives in a big, fine house out in the suburbs. And her mother works at Pizza Hut or someplace. I mean, her mother does not have the money that her father does. Her father just drives a big fat Mercedes, and her mother has a car that breaks down on the way to work every single day. So, but both of her parents love her. Her father is Black, her mother is white. So Izzy, or Isabella, says, okay, so what does that make me? If Dad is Black and what am I? Am I caramel? Am I a milkshake? She doesn't know how to identify herself. She doesn't know where she fits in the world because she lives 1 week with her mom and 1 week with her dad. They are exchanged. She's exchanged every Sunday at 3:00. She said, like an unwanted pair of jeans, I just get exchanged at the mall at 3:00 every single Sunday. And she hates that. She says, I go to mom's house, I go to dad's house. I never really get to go home. And so it's her struggle to find her place in the world. Who am I? What am I? Where do I belong? Is not just because of race. It's not just because of divorce. It's because she's 12 and a half, and this is what happens, and this is what you feel like at that age. Regardless of who you are, you're confused when you're 12 and a half. Let's see, I'm going to read a section here also. Some of the chapters are homework assignments that she's written out for school. I'm a teacher, so I kind of put homework assignments in the book. I'm sorry, I can't help it. Anyway, this is an essay that a teacher said, I want you to write about who you really are. And she says, I have no idea. So this is her chapter on who she is. It's called The Real Me. My name is Isabella Badia Thornton. Isabella's an awesome name. It flows like music on a waterfall. I gotta admit though, when I think of a character in a book named Isabella, she's tall, she's got blue eyes, and has long, flowing, pale gold hair. Well, actually that kind of describes my mom. But that blue-eyed princess is not me. My skin is kind of bronze colored, I guess. I'm not real tall. My eyes are deep green, and my hair is wild and kinky and kind of a dirty brown. If I'm reading a book about a girl named Isabella, I figure at some point she's going to walk on a golden sandy beach where the wind is blowing so that her perfect blonde hair can billow in the breeze. I've read that line in stories. Clearly, none of those writers have ever met me or my hair. My father gave me the middle name Badia. It's African. It means unique or unprecedented. I like that. He told me that he and mom had their first argument on the day I was born. She didn't want me to be bogged down by what she calls some crazy African name, but dad insisted, and he was right. When I say my middle name out loud, it lifts me up. I stand a little taller. When I'm a famous pianist, I'll make sure my name is written in fancy script on the program, that it says my full name, Isabella Badia Thornton. It is who I am. So she struggles with trying to figure out who she is and how to deal with her life and her parents and her school and the problems that crop up at school. And it builds to quite a bit of action in a mall. And it's funny, when I wrote the book, going to the mall was the thing that young people did on the weekend. You just kind of went to the mall to hang out. And we don't do that anymore. Just in a very short period of time, going to the mall and hanging out and sitting in the food court and just sitting around and having a milkshake at the food court. We don't even do that anymore. The last time I went to our local mall in Cincinnati, the food, all the food places had been shut down, and all the chairs and tables had been taken away, and the food court was blocked off, and it just wasn't even there anymore. It was kind of sad, and the stores were kind of limping around. So I want to give each of you, whether you are a teacher or a student, um, encouragement to continue to read, to write, to think, to plan, to go where you can safely, to do what you can um, with your mask on. And I've got a homework assignment for you, and this is for the teachers and the students. I want you to write your story about the pandemic. Every single one of us has a story about what we did and how this affected us. I want you to write it down because your kids will say, "Ma, you lived back there during the pandemic? You lived through 2020?" And I want you to say, "Yes, and this is what I wrote. This is what it was like being home for 4 months. This is what it was like learning at home. This is what it was like teaching at home." And this is for the teachers and the students and the parents. I want you to write down your memories of 2020. You'll be glad you did. I think we're supposed to do some questions now. Do we have time for questions? Are they popping up? How are we doing this? Is there a
Hi, Sharon. Yep, we will definitely take questions.
okay.
So we have one that just showed up. Okay, so first question. First off, your books are riveting, and how do you encourage students to pick up a book without making it an assignment?
Well, they say you shouldn't choose a book by the cover, but yeah, go for the cover. Whatever makes you pick that book up, then go for it. Flip through, read the first chapter, read the first page, open up to a page in the middle and say, "Ooh, that held my attention." I don't care what the reason is, just pick up a book and read it. Graphic novels are real popular now. Find a graphic novel. We used to call them comic books. They upgraded them to graphic novels so that we sound proper. Okay, find yourself a comic book and read it. I don't care what you read. You know, a magazine, Time magazine, TV guide, whatever. Read something.
Awesome. Next question. How powerful is reading aloud to students in the journey to engagement?
Absolutely powerful. High school teachers think, well, you're old and you're grown and you should read yourself. There is nothing more engaging than a teacher reading to a group of students. And they'll act like they don't want you to, and they'll act like they're bored. And when you stop, they'll say, "Keep going." It works all the time. I encourage teachers all the time, whether you are teaching little ones or all the way up through high school, read to them. They need to hear your voice, and they will never forget that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of echo that and build on it too, there are so many students who at that high school level, at the middle school level, even at the upper elementary level, they do not have the prosody in their reading abilities. So they need to have that language modeled for them.
Yes.
And if we as teachers don't take time to do that, then they're going to have that block there for a long time. So yeah, absolutely. So next question. Do you have any thoughts about any of your books becoming graphic novels potentially?
Anybody who's a graphic novelist and would like to do it, just give me a call. I mean, I would love to see any of them as a graphic novel or a movie. Just call me. They will open up movie theaters one day.
Yeah, someday, right? That's right. Next question. What does the middle grade label mean to you? Do you see your books as books for middle school students or middle school and up or upper elementary? who do you, when you're writing your books, and obviously I'm sure this kind of it varies somewhat depending on the book, but who are you writing for?
I'm writing in general for whoever picks the book up because, but I have found that if I'm 11 and I'm reading a book about somebody who's 11, I think that's really awesome, especially if the writer is able to capture age 11 exactly. Because age 11 is very different from age 13. And when you're 13, you think a lot differently and you're a little more sophisticated with your thinking. So I don't write for a particular age group, but I know that it makes a reader feel good when they find a book about somebody who's exactly their age. But the books can be read by anybody at any age.
Okay. Do you have any tips for encouraging writing in the classroom?
Absolutely. Don't make it boring and don't make it a requirement of some sort of grade. Um, every time I had my students write, I said, I'm not grading you on the quality of your writing. I will check errors for spelling and grammar, and I will tell you how you can express that better. But I'm not going to give a C to your poem, which is an expression of something that is from within you. So I will grade you on the process of writing, but not on the essence of what you wrote. So I think
Great.
Teachers get so caught up with your grammar is all messed up and you can't spell. That completely negates the fact that this person had a beautiful thought that she tried to express on paper. So we have to be careful about being too hypercritical on student writing and worry about their thought process first, and the grammar and that can all be fixed.
That's a good point. Next question. So this attendee said, I heard you speak passionately about Black Lives Matter earlier this year. Do you have an idea on how to write about that in a novel? People are starting to do this. Tori McDonald comes to mind. Curious your thinking on this.
Black lives have always mattered, still matter, and will matter. And it's for me, because I'm older, it's kind of interesting. It's like, oh, we're back to this again. It has become something of an issue that the larger community thinks about. It has always been critical and personal in my life and the lives of many people. So I think it's good that we have this new emphasis on Black Lives Matter, but Black lives have always mattered. The fact that somebody now has made that a quotation mark doesn't change the reality of the concerns and the problems. I think that it's very good that we have this new emphasis. I think that it gives teachers and caregivers more aware of the lives of their students. It gives students pride in who they are and what they can be. So it's all a good thing, and it's not new. It's just good that it's come to the forefront again.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions coming in at this point, but we will make sure to keep an eye on those questions as they do come in, and we can move forward into a little bit more of like a roundtable type discussion with our other authors. So thank you so much, Sharon. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to hearing from the other authors. This has been so cool. I would still prefer that we do this in person. I'm looking forward to doing it in person next year. But
that's right. Stay positive.
Yes.
Welcome to the 2020 Buckeye Book Fair. Thank you for joining us for this series of virtual events with Ohio authors and illustrators. The Buckeye Book Fair provides an annual celebration of literacy through author visits, educational programs for K through 12 students, and events for people of all ages. All of the books featured today and throughout the entire Buckeye Book Fair are available for purchase at buckeyebookfair.org. Should you have any questions for the presenters, please click on the Q&A button and type them in the window that appears, and they'll be answered later in the session. Cinda Williams Chima has worked for the Akron Beacon Journal and as a freelance journalist with the Cleveland Plain Dealer, turning to full-time writing in 2009. Her latest novel, Deathcaster, is the indispensable conclusion to the New York Times best-selling Shattered Realms series, in which this master storyteller delivers spellbinding action, bittersweet reunions, and dazzling revelations. Sharon Draper is, among other things, a National Teacher of the Year and Coretta Scott King Award winner. Her new novel, Blended, tells the story of Isabella, an 11-year-old piano prodigy whose black father and white mother struggle to share custody, and Draper explores how an adolescent deals with social and family turmoil. After working in public and community health for some years, Intisar Khanani decided to focus on her passion for writing and become an author. The book Thorn tells the tale of a 15-year-old princess, Alira, who always longed to escape the confines of her royal life, yet believes she has little hope for a better future. But when a mysterious sorceress robs her of her identity, she hopes to make a new life as a simple goose girl. However, she soon learns that fate has something more in store for her. David Lee Morgan Jr. is a longtime sports writer and motivational speaker who currently teaches English and creative writing at Massillon High School. His book, The Massillon Tigers, 15 for 15, is the powerful tale of one of the most storied high school football programs anywhere in the country and their magical 2019 season.
All right, we will get started with Cinda. Hi, Cinda, how are you?
Or I'll be good as soon as I'm unmuted.
All right, so let's get right into it. What can students learn from your books, or any of them?
Yeah, actually what I have I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
And I have kind of a brief series of slides planned. So let's see. I had this all set up.
All right.
Okay. Well, I'm Cinda Williams Chima, and I like to say I tell lies for a living. I have been a teacher in several different seasons of my life, but I am here today as a book writer and a book pusher because to me, reading, it's very much along the lines of what Sharon said, reading has been life-changing for me. In my opinion, every time a young reader has a good experience with a book, a seed is planted, and that's what grows a new crop of readers. And I think teachers and librarians can be the intermediaries to try to connect those kids with books, but it's the reading experience that makes for a lifelong reader. So I'm a big fan of self-selected pleasure reading, and I'll try to stay off my soapbox a little bit. In my mind, that when you read a book, it is by its nature a creative activity, because readers and writers are partners in story. I think there's some bad reasons to write for teens. To send a message, I always quail a little bit when an interested person comes up to me and said, you ought to write a book that will teach teens to do, X, Y, and Z, or to, not to get into trouble. Lessons arise out of story. They don't create story. A lot of people think writing for teens is easy, just as a lot of people think teaching is easy, and that's not the case. Writing for teens are a very demanding audience. I think the number one credential that a writer needs to have if they're going to write for teens is that they have to remember what it was like to be one. If you're one of those people that say, if you think it's hard now, you have no idea, people have forgotten what it's like to be a teen, and those are not folks who should be writing them. One of the reasons I value speaking to young readers and writers is that it would have made a huge difference in my own life. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my checkered career. I come from a family of Appalachian moonshiners, barn dancers, musicians, and indifferent housekeepers. But they were all storytellers, and it's something that's been handed down in my family. My first name, Cinda, actually came from a character in a book that my mother was reading before I was born. And I actually turned out to be twins, so there I am with my sister, Linda. I was not a promising student. Maybe some of you have had this child in your class. My mother called me a daydreamer, a wool gatherer. They suggested that I be held back in first grade because I was never on topic, on task, never in the right reading group, on time. It always seemed like what was going on in my head was a lot more interesting than what was going on around me. I believe I have ADD, but that wasn't a thing in those days. So I coped the best I could. What really changed my school career was reading. And I remember all summer long after first grade, my mother took me to the library, and we would bring home armloads of books. And we would read and we would read and we would read. And by third grade, I was a fluent reader. And you could see some of the books I was reading at that time. And that just made everything better. It didn't make me less of a daydreamer, maybe more of a daydreamer, but it gave me the skills I needed to overcome my lack of attention span. Maybe some of you have seen this library, Sylvester Library in Medina. It was next to Garfield Elementary School, where I went to school, and I used to go from school to library and get books and read them. Neil Gaiman said I was a feral child raised by librarians, and that's pretty much the case for me. By third grade, I had experienced literary success. I wrote a poem in third grade. My teacher framed it and put it up at the science fair. And I thought, okay, maybe this is what I'm good at. All it took was a little encouragement from a teacher. She didn't critique it, or she made a big fuss about it. And I thought, maybe I'm good at this. And I've never stopped writing since then, though it was decades before I would learn to make a living at it. In fact, I had never seen a writer in person. I didn't know where they all lived. I didn't realize that that was even a possibility. Reading and writing continued to be a refuge for me in junior high. My junior high years were full of misery. I wrote poems, essays, stories, songs. I wrote my first novels in junior high, which I often share when I go to middle schools. I say, when I was your age, I wrote my first novels. And some things never changed. They were always getting confiscated, and I was always in trouble for being off task. But I won the school English award in 9th grade and went on to become an honor student. So I really attribute, the teachers, the librarians, and the reading for helping me be successful. So at this point, I took a very crooked road to writing success. I've done a lot of things in the meantime. But at this point, I have 13 books published. I can't even begin to compete with Sharon, but I started really late. So my first series is the Air Chronicles. It's a fantasy series set in Ohio. And these are some of the different settings. I've had students write to me and say, I've been to Cedar Point. Have you been to Cedar Point? Have. So contemporary, accessible even to non-fantasy readers. My second series was The Seven Realms. This is long ago, far away. A thief and a princess join forces to save a queendom. And then The Shattered Realms is when things in the seven realms go from bad to worse. What's next? I'm working on a project that involves Norse influenced fantasy. So I'm pretty excited about that. So I didn't choose the straightest path. I think more and more these days, students are not necessarily following a direct path, but I feel like every experience I've had has contributed to my life as a writer. I mean, that's where the stories come from. And I tell students who are not confident that they have anything new to offer, that nobody has the same body of experiences that they do. Nobody can, even their best friend, has the same material to work from. So I'm on Facebook and all of the social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram. My website, cindachima.com, has information about writing workshops and school visits. Here are some pages from my website. There's a link, teachers, librarians, and students. There are a number of discussion guides for my books, the first 3 books in my Air Chronicles series. And then The Demon King was a Choose to Read Ohio selection. So I'm fortunate enough that there's a discussion guide written up for that. And then there's information about author visits. Again, I really enjoy talking to young writers and readers because I see myself in them. And that's, if anybody has any questions.
Well, we appreciate you. We appreciate you taking the time to speak about your books. I think we had a little bit of a technical issue. We weren't able to see your screen, but we do have your we have your contact information that we'll put into the chat box again, so everyone can go to your website. So
There it is.
yeah. Oh yeah, yep, there it is.
Okay, this is a good time to bring up the visuals. Well, I'm sorry about that. Trust me, the slides were stunning and stellar.
That's all right. The technology sometimes gets us, huh?
Yeah.
I totally understand it. We're going to move forward, and next up we have Intisar. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me here today. So I also am going to attempt to share my screen. Please holler if it doesn't show up. I have just a very short kind of introduction to who I am and to my most recent book. So there we go. Is that showing up?
Yep.
Okay, great. Come over here. So my name is Intisar. I write Mighty Girls and Diverse Worlds. I grew up a nomad and world traveler. I was born in Wisconsin. I lived in Saudi Arabia. I lived in 5 different states. I now live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I worked as a public health consultant focused on reducing infant mortality in Cincinnati and also addressing minority health disparities. And now I focus on raising my family and writing fantasy. I have been both indie and traditionally published. So Thorn is my traditional publishing debut. It's through Harper Teen, and it retells the Grimm's fairy tale, The Goose Girl, for a YA audience. It involves an identity switch, magic and betrayal, a talking horse, and a princess who saves the day, and it receives starred reviews in SLJ and the BCCB. So what is Thorn really about? It looks at issues around surviving abuse and trauma. It recognizes that self-empowerment is a difficult journey that requires hard work. You can't just say, hey, I am fixed today, or hey, I'm going to stand up for myself today, because it is much more than what you push yourself to do in one moment. It's a process. It also looks at justice and access to justice and systemic injustice. It looks at the role of mercy and compassion and justice, examines cycles of violence, and deals with grief and loss of a loved one. So it's actually a kind of heavy book, even though it's in this wonderful packaging of a fairy tale princess and a talking horse and curses and betrayal. So in terms of Thorn in the Classroom, I know one of the questions that was asked of us was, what can we actually do with this book in a classroom? So in terms of a unit study, as I mentioned, you can look at issues of justice and social justice, equity before the law, justice and compassion, and systemic injustice. And I think, as we mentioned earlier today with the Black Lives Matter movement, these are very relevant issues nowadays. And sometimes coming at them in a framework of a fantasy land where none of us lives makes it easier to have these conversations and think about them, because we're not directly critiquing our own lives and our own choices. The same with looking at women's rights and violence against women. As a content note, Thorn does have assault on the page, it has abuse, and there's rape off screen, so to speak. None of this is gratuitous. It is violent, it is terrible, there are very real consequences, and we learn to understand what is going on and what we can do. It's also about surviving abuse and trauma, and looks at the reality of what that looks like versus common portrayals in fiction. One of my pet peeves is, the abused character, often in young adult stories, who decides one day they're just going to snap their fingers and be over their trauma. And it does not work like that. You go home that night and your trauma is waiting next to you in your bed to sink its claws back into you. Surviving abuse is a journey. It's a process, and it's one that we watch our character go through in Thorn. It's also very well suited to independent studies or reads, looking at all of these issues. I do virtual visits. Sorry, I don't know what happened with my text here. It's a little bit offside, but usually with book discussions, I'll give a quick overview of why I chose this fairy tale and the issues that spoke to me through it. And then I'll answer student questions about the text and the writing. I try to focus on interactive discussion, but I can always do a short reading if that would be interesting to teachers. And then for creative writing classes, I focus on student-specific needs and growth. It's often a dynamic conversation around what students are struggling with themselves, and I will try to give them challenges to help them improve their craft. I am always happy to talk about being aware of cultural sensitivity and how to approach respectful representation, what that looks like versus cultural appropriation, which is definitely a big issue. So I'm going to show you how to get to my resources on my blog. Or not on my blog, excuse me, on my website. So you'll go to booksbyintisar.com, and you can go over to fans, click on book clubs, and it will take you to my author visit page. And if you click on the Thorn discussion guide, I do have a resource there that tells you a little bit about the book, gives my bio, and then has a one-page discussion guide with a number of good questions around that can be used both in classrooms and in book clubs. And I've had some lovely praise for Thorn, which I'm very grateful for. And then this is my contact information, which I know will also be shared. But basically, my handle is Books by Intisar. Anywhere you look, you'll find me. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. I don't know if there's any questions.
Well, Intisar, you were super efficient with that. You covered like everything. You're the most efficient person that we've had all week long.
Cover all the points.
Yeah, that was great. I'm not seeing any questions coming in, which isn't surprising because you were so efficient and you were on point with every single item to cover. So that was great. I always appreciate that. It makes my job really easy. I just get to introduce the next person up. So, so thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And then last but not least, we have David Lee Morgan Jr. Hey, David, how are you?
I'm doing great. Here's my book. Bye.
So David actually was in another session, actually last Friday. So this is my second time with David.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I mean, I really enjoy the Buckeye Book Fair and everything that you guys have done leading up to this kind of crazy time that we have now. Miss Sharon, I just want to tell you, thank you for your comments. And, you had mentioned a few things that I would love to share before I go into it. I teach English and creative writing, and I'm the journalism instructor. So I teach journalism as well. And one of the things that I do with my kids is we do a thing called one word, where I give them 60 seconds to write. It's a bell ringer. And I'll have a word on the board like leaves or couch or argument or whatever it is. And they'll have 60 seconds just to write whatever they want to write about that word. And we don't, and I don't grade those because like you said, make sure you try to spell it right, but I want to see what you write, because what we do is then we throw those on the board on our whiteboard, and then we show, okay, hey, this was a great sentence, but this is a dependent clause. You might need a comma here. So I try to teach from what they write, but they know they're not going to get a grade because I just want them to just write freely. So I think that point that you made was awesome. So I'll just get started. I teach at Massillon Washington High School. I was a sports writer for all of my career. I'm 54, so for almost 30 years I was a sports writer, but decided to go into teaching. So I went back to school and got my teaching license. I wanted to try the technology, but I got lucky last week, and I'm just going to leave it at that because it worked. So. I wish I had my other book. I've written 11 books here, mostly all sports. This is LeBron James, The Rise of a Star. This is the book that I just wrote this year. It's called The Massillon Tigers 15 for 15. Basically, I was asked to be the running backs coach last year at the last minute. It was like right before our first scrimmage. We had a coach who went to John Carroll as a grad assistant. So I came on board, and I knew it was going to be one and done. So I just thought, this would be a great experience to write a book about coaching at one of the most storied high school football programs in the country. So I just chronicled what it was like to coach there. But I want to kind of go and talk about what people can learn from the book, and both if I can. With the Massillon Tigers 15 for 15, that book. It talks about, what it was like to be in a town that's just all football and trying to get out of that stigma of it's just a football town, and how important it is for these kids to learn how to be winners on and off the football field when football is the only thing that people really, really care about to a certain degree. So it was interesting to write about that and be an outsider because I'm not from that area. With my LeBron book, what I would love for people to get out of that book is, here's a kid who grew up in a humble, very, very humble background. and ended up becoming one of the greatest basketball players of all time. What I love about that book is people feel like they can't relate to LeBron James, but LeBron grew up in a single household. His mom was 16 when she had him. So there are kids who can kind of relate to that. So that's what I would like for people to get out of that book. With the Massillon Tigers 15 for 15, the next question was, how can teachers use the books in lessons? I'll be honest with you, this book right here, it was just released in September. So we really don't use this book in the classroom right now, other than maybe pairing it when we do a little mini lesson on Friday Night Lights. We did a mini lesson on character development. And so what I tried to do was pair, what was it like in that Texas town and how can it relate to some of the things that go on in Massillon during football season. And the kids were anxious and excited about that because they could see what was in that film and in that book and almost compare what it was like to what they go through at Massillon. So that was interesting. I think the last one was, what can students, what can they talk about after they read the book? At Massillon with our 15 for 15, there is some animosity between kids who don't play sports and aren't in the band or play football. And even with that, some of the folks in the band feel like, they are kind of second fiddle, so to speak, to the football team. So we talk about, is it fair? We talk about how other people can look at Massillon and not just look at football and look at all the other good things that are happening in the Massillon community. As a matter of fact, the mayor of Chicago right now, Lori Lightfoot, she is a Massillon, Washington grad. And one of the great things I'm proud of is my journalism class, we were invited to the inauguration last year in Chicago because we reached out to her and we told her that, hey, we'd love to come there if there was any way. And we ended up being able to visit and spend 2 days in Chicago and be her guest. And we, at Wintrust Arena, we were in the suite, those high profile suites. And then afterwards, we were invited to her press conference at City Hall with only 100 people. And when she came in, she gave us the TIG, which is followed by ERS. And she went TIG. And it was just, those kids felt so, it was an experience that they'll never forget. And so that's one of the things that I'm proud of when it comes to Massillon, because football is great, yeah. But for our kids to be in that environment and witness history, it was something that they'll never forget. And the fact that they were able to write stories about that, and those stories appear in the Massillon Independent. And we were in the Chicago Sun-Times, and we were on the Chicago News at 5 o'clock. So that's what was really awesome. But again, with the book, it's about my year coaching at Massillon and just all the things that go on throughout the course of the football season, the behind the scenes that most people don't get a chance to see. But the last thing I'd like to just say is this. We were just talking about this the other day. Matter of fact, we were doing a lesson on argumentative, it was argumentative nonfiction, and if college athletes should get paid. And so what I did was I brought in some of my experience covering LeBron from 6th grade. And what I told them was, I said, think about this. I told them this story. In May of LeBron's senior year, he had a meeting with Nike, Reebok, and Adidas. And the meeting was at the Radisson. And it was to find out who he was going to sign with. Now, he's still in high school. And so before that meeting, Upper Deck Cards came in and said, hey, we want to kind of tie this deal up. So he signed a $6 million contract with Upper Deck. And then they left. And then he went into the meeting with Nike, Reebok, and Adidas. And I'll read you what's in the book. It says, Nike offered less money than Reebok, but they had just won the war. That night, LeBron James, not yet graduated from high school and not yet signed with a pro team, signed a deal with Nike for a reported $90 million. This is a kid. Now he's still in high school. So he has to go to school the next day and go to American government and have kids say, "Hey, LeBron, what'd you do last night?" That would be an interesting conversation. So I just leave it at that. It's just these two books that I've done, The Mask and 15 for 15. I love being in this classroom to share some of these stories with kids and then have them relate, try to relate to some of these stories and write about some of the themes that are relatable. And the same thing with the LeBron book. If we have our information up there. If anyone would like to contact me and discuss either book more, I'd love to. But just thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing. Intisar and Cinda, I'm looking at, thank you guys for coming on, and I really appreciate it. And, keep reading and keep writing more than anything.
Thank you so much, David. I have one question that I received, and this was to the group, so everybody. What's the best piece of advice to young readers and writers? Like one piece of advice, and it can be everybody that shares, it can be one person that shares, but what is your piece of advice?
I'll go with that. My first suggestion is to read anything you can get your hands on and read what you like. Don't read what somebody says you ought to read. Read what you like. Like what Cinda said, how her reading style and what she liked to read was different than other people. Read what you like. Read what makes you happy. Read what teaches you something, and then read some more. That's all I can say.
I have some advice for young writers. And it's whether you're new or experienced, is that you have to be able to give yourself permission to write badly. Mm-hmm. Because you can always fix what you've written, but you can't do anything with the blank page. So and one of the hardest things I think is to turn the editor off in your head for a while and get your story down. And then you can wake her back up and go to work. But you'll never get lost in story if you're constantly second guessing and fixing everything.
I would say this. I agree with Ms. Sharon. Read what you like. I said this last week. Read what you like, and then read the heck out of it. If you like comic books, read the heck out of comic books. You might be a sketch writer for Saturday Night Live one day. But this is what I tell my kids. I always carry a pen. I keep this around my neck all the time because I always have ideas or something. And I keep a little tablet because you never know when some type of inspiration will hit you. And you guys all know, you'll say, I'll jot that down, and you'll forget it. And it might be that nugget that God gave you that could be the greatest thing ever, and you completely forgot it. So I always tell kids, jot down everything. Even if you think it's nothing, write it down.
Great point. Thank you.
Very hard to follow up all of that with anything different.
Yeah, you drew the short straw. Yeah, you had to come last.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I'm going to add anything onto it, I think it's kind of what was touched on earlier, but really focusing in on the fact that we each have an important story to share. And whether that's a story about ourselves or about a fictional character in a fantastical universe doesn't matter. The important thing is to dig into ourselves and share. And it can be scary, it can be joyful, it can be heartrending, but we all have something to share. And that is part of our life work, is to share with others.
Very
Awesome.
well said. Well, thank you. I appreciate everyone's attendance tonight, and I wish you all safety and health as we move forward. We are coming up on the end of our session today. We have some contact information available. Obviously, all of our presenters and authors' contact information is in the chat. It is also available at buckeyebookfair.org, where you can purchase all these books that we spent the last hour talking about too. So, and just in case you're wondering, just go to buckeyebookfair.org, and then you can go to that online bookstore. You can also look at the author lineup as well as the whole brochure for this year. So, and I did promise professional development certificates. So if you are in need of professional development certificates, you can either scan that QR code or type in the URL there, and you can get your professional development contact hours that are needed. So again, I just want to say to Sharon, thank you so much for being our keynote presenter, but also thank you to all of our other authors, Cinda, Intisar, and David. You guys were great tonight, and we appreciate it. So we hope that you have a great weekend, and like I said, stay healthy.
It was wonderful.